Good evening, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to my final predictions of the 2020 U.S. elections. I'm just going to give a ballpark estimate for the House and say that it stays within about 50, I'd say about 10 seats either way of the current sitting House. I don't really see a ton of movement, maybe a few seats won or lost here or there. I think Utah's fourth and Oklahoma's fifth both returned to the Republican Party. The Republicans should actually make significant gains in Minnesota's House races, but that's kind of where things stand. Now, let's move on to the Senate, where I've got my current prediction up, and this is my final prediction. After the Selzer poll was released from Iowa, finding that Trump was up, I think it was 7, with a few undecideds, and Ernst up. I moved it from basically a pure toss up to leans Republican, though I could honestly put it into the likely category. Uh, and it's not because of the margins. Remember, for anything that is not my model, I'm doing this based off of confidence. I'm fairly confident, but not quite confident enough to say, yeah, it's most likely going to go there. It's likely, but not enough for me to say I'm 100% confident. Similar thing with Montana. Bullock has been polling extremely well over Dane, so or not over, but he's been polling well against Dane, so it is possible. And similar thing in Georgia. I think that at the end of the day, both Republicans are going to win. Both seats are going to be occupied by a Republican. The state is just a touch too red, and you know, I'm skeptical of the polls that are favoring the Democrats, Warnock and Ossoff. Ossoff was, of course, supposed to win against Karen Handel in 2017, and he didn't. And a lot of that, I think, is because I think they were overestimating him in polling in whatever. Alabama, that's a flip. I'm so dead certain on that, it's not even worth it to talk about. I made this joke a while back. Tuberville is a national championship winning coach, football coach in Alabama against a Democrat who only won because he was running up against a pedo. So, yeah. Kentucky, I'm not talking about that one. It's not competitive. If you think it is, you're crazy. South Carolina, I'd put it in the likely category because I can see one or two scenarios where Harrison can beat Lindsey Graham, but I'm fairly confident about this one. Texas, I'm pretty darn confident about Henry, not Cuellar, John Cornyn versus Hagar. In Alaska, I'm pretty confident about Sullivan beating Gross. And North Carolina, I really think Cunningham was hurt by that scandal of illicit text messages. I'm trying to word that in a very specific way. But yeah, that scandal kind of hurt him, and he might. Polls have definitely narrowed significantly in that one, so I'm not confident Cunningham can beat Tillis. Virginia and New Hampshire really aren't worth talking about. Even though I put them in the likely category. Similar thing with New Mexico, just not worth talking about. I'm confident about them, but again, I can see one or two weird scenarios where they could flip. Um, Maine, unfortunately, I don't think Collins is going to win. Unfortunately, I'm trying to remain unbiased. I kind of like Collins from the idea that she represents what the Republican Party kind of is supposedly trying to be, which is the moderate right wing party. But She's relatively independent, um, but I just don't think she's going to win her seat. Polls have indicated that Gideon is just in a much better position. Um, though Collins might be slightly underestimated, and there's a lot of undecideds and third party voters in the race. It's almost certain that Collins could, you know, it's possible for Collins to win, but it's almost certain she won't. But I see a healthy number of situations in which she could win, so that's why I put in the lean. Arizona, Mark Kelly is just a better candidate than Martha McSally, which, to be fair, is not a very high bar. I think against a normal Republican from Arizona who wasn't McSally, Mark Kelly would be getting thumped handedly. And this is because Mark Kelly is just too California for Arizona, basically. He is way too anti-gun for the state. And there's a few other policy positions that just don't quite match with Arizona, and the only reason he's up is because he's running against McSally, who's one of the few Republican Senate candidates who's running behind Donald Trump. And that should tell you everything you need to know about McSally's qualities as a candidate. Going on to Colorado, Cory Gardner is more than likely going to lose. I was debating whether or not to put this in the safe category but I decided I can see a weird fluke situation where the seat could flip. But maybe this is just personal weirdness creeping in, and you could justify that I should have Alabama is likely in that case. So yeah, do with that as you will. The last two races I think of note are Michigan and Minnesota. I'm putting them in the lean because I can see a situation where the Republicans win. Minnesota is less likely, and I was debating putting that one into the likely Dem column. Michigan, John James is a very strong candidate. He's very good for the state, and he's running ahead of Donald Trump in most polls. So if that state is closer than polling indicates, James has a very strong chance of picking up the state. But I just don't see enough of a justification to put in the tilt category. So this is the Senate map, and I think it's a very fair map to look at and to discuss, and this would be a good jumping off point. By the way, I decided to do a mathematical breakdown of all the statewide races that I've called or that I've predicted so far in the history of this channel. And there was 126 races that I've predicted. And I was getting 90% of those. Basically 114 of 126. All right, so let's move on to what my election model that I designed here is saying about the election. And it's saying it's a squeaker. This is an extremely narrow election, but it's saying that Donald Trump has a chance. It's one of those, so you're saying there's a chance? However, there are a few areas where I actually disagree with my model. And we'll get to those in just a second, but it's saying that there's only going to be 4 states that flip: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And these are based off of the margins. So tilt, this color, is anything within 5%. Leans is 5 to 10%. Likely is 10 to 15%. And Texas. And safe is 15% or greater of a margin. So when we go over here and look at this is showing confidence. And there are a few areas where I disagree with my model. One is Arizona. I think polling has been relatively steady there, and while there has been some movement towards Trump in the aggregate, I'm not sure it's not a case of what's been happening in the rest of the desert Southwest where the Republicans have been uh, slightly overestimated. And this actually is starting to include Texas as well, where the Republican Party has been starting to be overestimated in terms of how well they'll perform. And you look to a state like Nevada as a prime example of that. However, what I'm looking at is that there I'm not entirely confident about Arizona calling it for the Democrats because most polls crosstabs definitely indicate Donald Trump has improved potentially significantly with Hispanic voters who are a major voting bloc in this region, in the desert Southwest, in Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and even Utah, certainly Texas. And I could easily see some situations where Trump could actually win more than just Arizona. He could win Nevada. I think New Mexico is hilariously more likely than Colorado to flip, simply because of its own demographics. Colorado is a lot more educated, has a lot more college educated voters than New Mexico. So that's my basis for saying why New Mexico would flip before Colorado. So moving into the Sun Belt, another area I disagree with my model on is Florida. And the reason why I disagree on Florida is it seems Republicans' early vote numbers have been far stronger than anticipated, and the Republicans have had a very strong get out the vote effort. Um, I'm basically trusting the Florida man vote, and I think Miami-Dade is surprisingly going to be a lot closer than it was in 16 because it seems Trump maybe has actually unified the Cuban vote, the Cubano vote. Um, Whether or not this is accurate is another question altogether, but if Trump really is doing in the mid 30s in terms of Hispanic support, he's going to be close to winning it in Florida just because of the unique demographic makeup of Florida Hispanics. Um, North Carolina, I think I think Trump will hold it. Um, Reason I say this is polls there have definitely narrowed significantly, especially with the Cunningham Tillis race also uh, narrowing significantly. And if you look at the RCP average, Trump actually leads in that now, ever so slightly. Iowa, the reason I put it in the likely category is the Selzer poll from the other day. I think that's more than fair. Ohio typically votes very similarly to Iowa, maybe slightly to the right. So I don't think it's unfair to put it there. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were very, very on edge in 2016. And if Trump is doing similarly well in Iowa, he has the potential to do similar to how he did in 2016 in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So if Trump is actually winning Iowa by 7 or 8 points, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are going to be nail biters. And Biden will not be able to have a very secure time going forward. Michigan, a little bit more Dem leaning. That's a tougher lift. Minnesota, a similar thing, unless people really are correct about the riots helping Trump, but polling seems to indicate probably not, more than likely not. New Hampshire, I actually think it's going to be a more Dem this time around than it was in 2016 for sure, and probably more than people are expecting A similar thing. Trump is probably still going to get that second congressional district, though. So there's that. Overall, I think Trump absolutely has a realistic shot at winning. Um, However, as it's looking right now, I'm going to say Biden's probably going to win. But we'll see what happens. Um, and anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end it. Hope y'all enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Take it easy. Have a very nice evening. And likes, comments, subscriptions always do help, especially this close to the election. Um, Links down in the description to basically important things, including my model, which I am freezing at this point. It will not change. Uh, it's a final version of my model, and there's also a link to a Patreon to contribute if you so desire. Anyway, thank y'all. Have a very nice evening. God bless.